In life, trust among family members is often seen as the solid foundation of all relationships. However, sometimes the people we love the most can cause us the deepest pain. This is the case for Alex, a young man who was shocked to discover that his parents secretly opened a credit card in his name to fund their personal spending, leaving him with over $10 in debt. More than just a financial issue, this betrayal struck at the core of his emotional well-being, raising serious questions about the true meaning of family and trust. It all began on a typical Tuesday morning. Alex had just finished his cup of coffee and was sorting through his mail, expecting nothing more than the usual advertisements, bills, or maybe a couple of discount coupons. But then, nestled between a car insurance flyer and a store catalog, he noticed a letter from a debt collection agency. At first, he felt confused. He didn't owe anyone money, at least not a large sum. His credit cards were paid on time. He hadn't taken out any recent loans, and he definitely wasn't the kind of person to ignore financial responsibilities. He tore open the envelope, curiosity quickly turning into unease. The letter was short and to the point, with bold print at the top, urgent, action required. As he read through it, confusion turned into disbelief. The agency was trying to collect over $10 in debt from a credit card under his name, a card he had no memory of ever opening. The statement listed late fees, accumulated interest, and months of missed payments. The letter even included a proposed payment plan, urging him to call within 10 business days to avoid legal action. Alex sat frozen for a moment, reading the letter over and over, hoping it was some kind of scam or mistake. But the account number, the credit card company's logo, and the tone of the letter, it all felt far too real. His name and address were correct. There were no suspicious links, no phishing attempts, just a harsh reality staring him in the face. Someone had opened a credit card in his name, maxed it out, and never paid it back. At first, Alex thought it might be fraud, that maybe someone had stolen his identity. The possibility alone was terrifying. He had heard stories about identity theft and how messy and time-consuming it could be to fix. He immediately logged in to check his credit report online, his heart pounding as the page loaded. And there it was. The credit card had been opened nearly a year ago, with an initial credit limit of $8, which had ballooned to over $10 due to interest and fees. The payment history showed months of inactivity. The worst part? The billing address was his parents' house, the home he grew up in. It didn't make sense. Why would a scammer use his parents' address? He picked up the phone and called the credit card company directly. After verifying his identity, the customer service representative confirmed everything. Yes, the card was active for several months. Yes, it had been used for cruise vacations, restaurants, and electronics. And yes, the account had been opened online using his social security number, full name, and home address. It was official. Someone he knew, someone with access to all his personal information, had done this. Alex sat in silence, his mind racing. Only a handful of people could have opened that account without him knowing. And they were all family. He didn't want to believe it, but the details were lining up too perfectly. His parents had seemed oddly lavish over the past year. They had gone on 2 cruises, even though they'd never taken vacations before. At the time, Alex had been happy for them, thinking maybe they were finally enjoying retirement. When he asked about it, they brushed it off with vague excuses like, "We got a great deal," or, "Your mom won a raffle at the store." Now, it all felt like lies. Alex stared out the window, thoughts swirling. He had always trusted his family with everything. He never imagined that trust could be broken so deeply. He didn't want to accept it, but the facts were undeniable. His identity hadn't been stolen by some stranger online, it had been taken from inside his own home. He felt a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, betrayal, anger, sadness. Part of him still hoped it was some kind of mistake. Maybe someone had accidentally used his name. Maybe it was just a horrible coincidence. But deep down, he already knew. His gut told him the truth he didn't want to face. What do you even do in a situation like this? Call the police? Press charges against your own parents? File a lawsuit? Alex didn't know. He had always considered himself someone who could handle adversity. But this was different. This wasn't just a random hardship, this was family. The rest of the day, he couldn't focus. He skipped lunch, ignored his phone, and started gathering every document he could find. He printed out the credit report, took photos of the letter, and began writing a timeline of events. It still felt like a nightmare, like he'd fallen into a bad dream he couldn't wake up from. That evening, he sat alone in his apartment, the stack of unopened mail still on the table beside him. He read the debt letter again, this time with a strange sense of detachment, like it had been addressed to someone else. But the name at the top, his name, was clear as day. This was his mess now, whether he liked it or not. And the worst part? He still hadn't spoken to his parents. He didn't know what he'd even say. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear the truth. But one thing was certain. Alex's life had just changed forever. After receiving the letter from the debt collection agency, Alex couldn't sit still. Questions filled his head. How could he possibly owe over $10 on a credit card he never even opened? Had someone stolen his identity? Or was this all just some kind of mistake from the bank? Determined to find answers, he began investigating the situation himself. The first thing Alex did was call the collection agency to request detailed information about the account. The representative confirmed that the credit card had been opened the year before under his name, using his social security number and his parents' home address, where he had lived for years. That raised a red flag immediately. How could a stranger know all of that personal information? And why was the address his parents'? Next, Alex contacted the credit card company to request a copy of the account statements. He had to answer a string of security questions to verify his identity, something he found painfully ironic considering it appeared his identity had already been compromised. After a few days, the statements arrived. That's when everything started to make sense. As he scrolled through the transactions, Alex saw payments for cruise tickets, hotel stays, fine dining, and purchases at souvenir shops in popular port cities. Nothing about the activity suggested this was a case of random fraud. In fact, it all looked shockingly familiar, if the user had been a member of his own family. Some transactions even listed cities that matched the locations his parents had casually mentioned visiting during their recent trips. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together. He called the credit card issuer again to ask for more information about how the account was opened. The representative told him the application had been submitted online from an IP address located in the same city his parents lived in. The email and phone number on the application? Both matched his family's contact details. At this point, Alex felt like the ground beneath him was falling away. Even with all this evidence pointing toward his parents, Alex still tried to believe there was another explanation. Maybe someone else in the family had been scammed. Maybe a hacker had used their information too. Maybe it wasn't intentional. He didn't want to believe that his own parents, the people who raised him to be honest and responsible, were capable of something like this. But deep down, he knew. The signs were too clear, too specific to ignore. He decided it was time to confront them. When he brought up the debt, his father at first acted surprised, suggesting maybe someone had accidentally used their address or perhaps it was a clerical error. But Alex had come prepared. He laid out the evidence, IP addresses, matching email and phone numbers, and the clear link between the cruise transactions and their recent vacations. There was a long silence. Then finally, his father exhaled heavily and said, "Yeah, your mom and I opened the card. I'm sorry." Those words hit Alex like a freight train, not just because of the confession itself, but because of how casually it was delivered. There was no visible remorse in his father's voice. No desperation, no panic, just resignation. Alex tried to keep his emotions in check, but his thoughts were racing. He asked, "Why? How could you do this without even telling me?" His father replied slowly, "We never got to travel much. We just wanted to enjoy ourselves a little. We were going to pay it back. But the monthly payments got too high. So, we stopped." Every belief Alex had ever held about his parents came crashing down. He wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. Was this the man he had once admired? Or a stranger pretending to be someone he trusted? He turned to his mother, hoping for some kind of explanation or apology, but she stayed quiet. Eyes downcast. Maybe it was shame, maybe it was guilt, or maybe she just didn't care to explain. Either way, something had fundamentally shifted inside Alex. He was no longer the son who looked at his parents with unconditional trust. That version of him had been replaced by someone grappling with betrayal. Betrayal by the people who were supposed to protect him. Alex sat frozen after his father's brief confession. A heavy silence hung in the room like a thick curtain. Everything around him suddenly felt unfamiliar, even his own parents. "You've got to be kidding me. Is this really happening?" Alex's voice was tight, his attempt at staying calm already beginning to crack. "You seriously opened a credit card in my name, and my siblings too? Just to go on vacations?" David, his father, nodded slowly, avoiding his son's gaze. "I'm sorry, Alex. Your mom and we never really got the chance to enjoy life. We've worked our whole lives. Always saving, always being careful. When we saw the cruise deals, we thought, with a little help, we could finally do something for ourselves." "Help?" Alex's eyebrows raised. "You mean stealing my identity?" "Don't say it like that." Linda, his mother, interjected softly. "We never meant to hurt you. We really thought we'd be able to pay it all back. When we opened the card, we were planning to stay on top of it. But the bills started stacking up. The interest grew faster than we expected. And we just couldn't keep up." A storm was swirling in Alex's head. He remembered how his parents had gushed about their cruises. Those sunny pictures on the ship's deck. The joy in their voices when they described fancy dinners and exotic ports. Now, each of those memories felt tainted, evidence of a betrayal hidden in plain sight. "I never imagined you were taking out debt in my name to fund those trips," Alex said, voice low but shaking. "Did it ever occur to you what that would do to me? My credit is ruined. I haven't even started building my future yet. No student loans. No mortgage. Now I'm tens of thousands in debt." "We know, son, we know," David said, voice nearly a whisper. "We didn't think far enough ahead. We thought we could manage for a few months, and then start paying it off. But the payments got too high, and we just stopped." "So that's it?" Alex snapped. "You just gave up and dumped the consequences on me?" His father had no response. Linda reached for David's hand, her eyes starting to fill with tears. "We're not bad people, Alex. We were just tired, worn down. For once in our lives, we wanted to feel alive. At my expense?" Alex's voice cracked with frustration. "Do you understand that this could wreck everything for me? I have to live with the financial consequences of something I never did. This is my life you played with." The room fell into silence again. "What about my siblings?" Alex asked after a moment. "Did you do the same thing to them?" David lowered his head. "Some, but not as much. You had the longest credit history. So, we picked you." That sentence was a dagger straight to the heart. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a deliberate choice. Alex realized he wasn't just taken advantage of, he was selected. Sacrificed. He stood up abruptly. "I can't do this. I need time. I need to think." Linda reached out quickly. "Don't walk away like this. We can fix it. Just give us a chance." Alex looked at the two people who had raised him, guided him, and supposedly loved him, yet here they were, calmly admitting they'd used his identity like it was a spare credit card. Some things can't be fixed with an apology. Sometimes trust, once it's gone, doesn't come back. He walked out of the house, feeling like the world had collapsed behind him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure who his parents really were anymore. After the difficult conversation with his father, Alex hoped to see some sign of remorse, some real effort from his parents to fix the damage they had caused. What he didn't expect, however, was the cold indifference that followed. A few days later, his mother, Linda, called and asked to meet. She said she wanted to clear the air. Despite still being angry, Alex didn't want to completely shut the door on his family. So he agreed. They met at his parents' house on a rainy afternoon. Everything inside the house looked just as it always had, the same worn-out sofa. The faint smell of his mother's baking, but something inside Alex had changed. The warmth he once felt was gone, replaced by a chill of betrayal. Linda poured him a cup of tea and began the conversation as if they were just chatting about everyday life. "Your dad told me you're upset," she said gently. "I understand, but you know, grown-ups sometimes make bad choices." Alex stayed quiet, waiting to hear where she was going with this. "We've thought it over," she continued. "You should file for bankruptcy. That way, you'll be free from the debt. A lot of people do it. It's not that big of a deal. Alex blinked, stunned. You're telling me to declare bankruptcy over a credit card I never opened? Well, it's not like we planned it to turn out this way. Linda shrugged. If we had the money, we'd pay it back, but we don't. Bankruptcy is the easiest solution. Alex stared at her in disbelief. His own mother was suggesting he ruin his financial future, just to clean up a mess she had made. And she said it like it was no big deal. Do you even feel guilty? He asked. His voice tight. You used my name, wrecked my credit, and now your solution is for me to just give up? Don't be so dramatic, she replied, a bit annoyed. You're still young. You'll bounce back in a few years. Then came the part that truly broke him. Oh, and before you go through with it, she added nonchalantly, would you mind if we opened 1 or 2 more cards in your name? Just to get a few things we still need. Then you can file for bankruptcy right after. Alex was speechless. He stood up abruptly. You're kidding, right? I'm not. If you're going bankrupt anyway, a little more won't make a difference. That was the moment it all clicked. His parents didn't just make a mistake. They weren't just desperate. They were exploiting him. And now, they weren't even trying to hide it. You don't see how wrong this is? He asked, stunned. Not just for me, but for you. For your own sense of right and wrong? Linda sighed. You take things too seriously. Nobody's totally honest these days. People cut corners to get by. Alex didn't respond. He grabbed his jacket and walked out of the house he once called home. Every step away from that door felt like walking further from the past, and from the people he once believed would protect him no matter what. The rain outside fell in soft, steady drops, damp and cold, but nothing was colder than the feeling in his chest. He hadn't just lost trust. He had lost the image he had of his family, of what family was supposed to be. The most painful part wasn't the debt. It wasn't the risk of losing his credit or being forced into bankruptcy. It was realizing he had become just a tool, a name on a document, for someone else's reckless choices. From that moment on, Alex understood. Some fractures can't be repaired. Some apologies will never be enough. And some relationships, even those tied by blood, must be left behind if you're going to protect yourself. Alex sat in his car for a long while after leaving his parents' house. The rain was still falling softly, water trickling down the windshield like silent tears. His heart pounded in his chest, not from anger anymore, but from shock and a deep sense of betrayal. He couldn't wrap his head around it. How could the people he trusted the most, the ones he loved the most, do something like this to him? The betrayal hadn't come from strangers, not from enemies. It came from his own parents. The very people who once held him when he was scared, who taught him to be honest and decent, had coldly used his name to open credit cards, spend recklessly, and now casually suggested he declare bankruptcy to erase their wrongdoing. They even had the nerve to ask if they could open a few more cards before he did it. During the entire drive home, Alex felt numb. His mother's voice echoed in his head, if you're filing for bankruptcy anyway, a few more cards won't make a difference. He shook his head, gripping the steering wheel tighter. He knew then, he couldn't stay near them anymore. He couldn't forgive this, and he couldn't pretend like it never happened. When he got back to his small apartment, he didn't do anything. He sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands, letting time pass in silence. That night, he didn't sleep. Memories of childhood flooded his mind, family dinners, birthday hugs, the comforting smell of home. Were those moments real, or had they all been a mask? The next day, the phone started ringing. First it was his mom, then his dad, then came the text messages, explanations, apologies. We're still a family. They said it over and over again. But Alex turned his phone off. He couldn't let himself hear their voices. If he did, he might cave. But now, more than anything, he needed peace. In the weeks that followed, Alex focused on getting legal help. He contacted a lawyer who specialized in identity theft. He laid everything out, the debt collection letter, the confessions from his parents, the cruises paid for with his name. The lawyer listened carefully, then told him that this wasn't just a family issue, it was a criminal act. Identity theft. Alex didn't want to take his parents to court, but he also couldn't accept being stuck with over $10 in debt. With the lawyer's help, he began the process of reporting the fraud. contacting credit agencies, freezing his accounts, and repairing his credit report. Meanwhile, the calls from his parents continued. The tone began to shift, from regret to guilt-tripping. "You're being so stubborn. You're tearing this family apart. It's just money. Why are you making such a big deal?" But to Alex, it wasn't just money. It was trust. It was character. It was a wound in his heart that no apology could heal. He started going to therapy. Each session helped him breathe a little easier. He learned to accept that sometimes, the people you love the most are also the ones who hurt you the deepest. And that cutting ties wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. Alex also began sharing his story on forums, connecting with others who'd been betrayed by their families in similar ways. The support and shared experiences helped him realize he wasn't alone. He no longer felt ashamed for walking away from his parents, because his pain was real. And he had every right to protect himself. Maybe he'd never forget the sting of that betrayal, the moment he walked out of the home he grew up in, realizing everything had changed. But Alex knew his life wasn't over. Each day forward was a step toward something better. One day, he'd learn to trust again, starting with himself. And if anyone ever asked him what made him strong, he'd say, that moment. The moment he left. The moment he stopped making excuses for others and chose to believe he deserved better. Because sometimes, finding yourself means walking away from everything you thought you couldn't live without. Before all of this happened, Alex had always thought he had a normal, even happy family. While they weren't wealthy or particularly traditional, he always believed his parents were kind-hearted and responsible. At least, that's what he had thought. Alex used to proudly tell his friends that his parents were thrifty and lived modestly. They never splurged on unnecessary things. And they never complained, even when times were tough. So when his parents suddenly went on 2 cruises in 1 year, he thought it was a bit odd, but didn't think much of it. He figured maybe they had saved up for it or perhaps someone had gifted them a vacation. He never once suspected that he, unbeknownst to him, was the one financing those trips. The truth hit him like a hammer when his dad finally admitted that they had opened credit cards in his name and his siblings' names to fund their vacations. Alex felt like everything was crashing down. It wasn't just a legal violation, it was a blatant betrayal of his trust. He couldn't look at his parents the same way anymore, even though they tried to justify their actions, saying that they meant to pay it back but couldn't afford the monthly payments. It didn't matter to Alex. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal of his trust. What hurt most was that they never bothered to ask him. They took away his right to make a decision. And worse, they seemed to think it was perfectly fine, even suggesting that they could open more credit cards before he declared bankruptcy. This wasn't like the usual small arguments and disagreements he had with his parents in the past. This wasn't just a crack in their relationship, it was a complete collapse. A foundation he had always trusted was shattered. Alex began to question all the memories he once held dear. The times his parents had hugged him. The family dinners. The laughter during birthdays. Were those moments real? Or were they just a facade, masking something much darker beneath the surface? He didn't want to think that way. But he couldn't stop himself. Once trust is broken, even the fondest memories start to feel tainted. Still, deep down, Alex felt heartbroken. He didn't want to hate his parents. He didn't want to be the one to sever ties with his family. But at the same time, he couldn't just pretend like nothing had happened. He asked himself, if he ever had children of his own, how could he teach them to trust people when he had been betrayed by those closest to him? In the days that followed, Alex kept pondering whether he should try to talk things through with his parents. But then he remembered the look in his dad's eyes when he was caught, an expression not of guilt, but of embarrassment, as though regretting only that they had been caught. He remembered his mom's comment, if you're filing for bankruptcy anyway, let me open a few more cards first. Those words didn't just hurt, they made him realize his parents hadn't truly grasped the severity of what they had done. That was the moment Alex knew he couldn't continue pretending. He couldn't continue to go back to how things were. Even if they were his parents. Even if they apologized. He couldn't just ignore the fact that their actions were reckless, selfish, and hurtful. The emotional fallout was unlike anything Alex had ever experienced. It wasn't about the money, or even the debt. It was about trust, integrity, and respect. He realized he couldn't just forgive them and move on as if it were no big deal. He wasn't sure whether their relationship could ever be repaired, but it would require a level of understanding and change from both sides that, at that moment, seemed impossible. Alex sought out advice from lawyers, financial experts, and even therapists. Everyone he spoke to told him he wasn't wrong for wanting distance. They reminded him that forgiving didn't mean forgetting, and cutting contact didn't mean he hated them. It was an act of self-preservation. He still wasn't sure whether he would try to reconcile with his parents. Perhaps one day, when he was calmer and when they genuinely understood the gravity of their actions, he might sit down and have a conversation. But for now, he knew that healing would take time. And it was something that had to happen for him, not for them. For now, Alex was focused on rebuilding his life, one without the burden of debt and, more importantly, one without the deceit of those he had trusted most. Because sometimes, family isn't enough to fix everything. Sometimes, what you need more than anything is fairness and respect, even from the people who brought you into this world.